Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Karin Tenelius. She was the co-author of the book Moose Heads on the Table with Lisa Gill, who's a previous guest on the podcast. I'm delighted I now have completing the set of authors from that book with Karin here today. Karin's also an entrepreneur and a leadership trainer, developer. Karin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I think the other bit of context for people is this book, Moose Heads on the Table. The subtitle is Stories About Self-Managing Organizations from Sweden. And you're one of the world's leading advocates, perhaps, for self-managing organizations. So it's great for us to be able to dive into it, not just from the perspective of someone who's written the theory of it, but who has very much got your hands dirty on several occasions with putting these principles into practice with different organizations and leading those organizations. So, you know, the wealth of experience you've got with the rubber hitting the road with these ideas, I think is going to be of great interest to our listeners today. Yes. So I wonder if we should just start by giving people a bit of background. Where did you first get turned on to these ideas? Like, what was your incubation into this mindset and way of doing things?
Yeah, it was very early, and it was like several inspirations. But the first one was that I studied marketing when I was young, and especially marketing of services. I was in the hotel industry, and in all the service management books that we read at school, they said that to give the authority to people who were providing services was key to create engagement, and that would affect the service quality very much. And I believed those theories and thought they were happening out there in the working life, which proved they didn't. So I was a bit shocked when I saw the gap between what was in the books and what was happening in service companies. So that was one insight, and I had a luck to meet with some really good people early in my career who shared those thoughts, and we did some groundbreaking work in big organizations, which I thought was, you know, common and normal because I was so young and unexperienced. But in the rear mirror, I really got that. I was so lucky to meet those people, sort of. The other thing that happened was that I read Ricardo Semler's book, like a lot of people did.
The initiation for so many of us, right?
Yes, yeah. And so that was very, very long ago that I read it. And reading that book, I could never, you know, those thoughts were so impactful and strong that I carried them with me for many, many years. And I ended up I was a marketing director in a big company. And then I got this allergy to hierarchies very early when I was like 29, long ago. So I quit that and became a freelance consultant. And one day I got the opportunity to try out Ricardo's ideas in a small hotel. 1999. So that was long ago. And so that was the start of it, really.
Right. And just for our listeners, if people are not familiar with that book, then just lay out some of the principles you took from Ricardo Semler's book and started applying in that hotel.
Yeah, the book is the story about how he transformed a company he inherited from his father. And it's so detailed with scenes, you know, with people that have names, managers so it's like you can really picture what happened. And that's so different from management books with models and theory, which I can't grasp anyway. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not like an academic person. But his ideas I really got and then got the opportunity to try them out. So it was so clear what was happening there, and that made it understandable. And then I just continued to try out what he had done, really.
Right. And so can you, in the same vein then, can you introduce us to a few characters from that hotel, casting your mind back, and some of the scenes that I suppose you created in that?
Yeah, sure. It was long ago and I've done so many things since then, but it was a small hotel, and it was run by the CEO, who was a very powerful woman. So it was about 14 or 15 people there, mostly women, as it is in the hotel industry. And there were no problems in that hotel. It was flourishing, and it was, a good atmosphere, and everybody appreciated their manager and everything. So it was nothing wrong. And I was hired to do some traditional service training a Sunday, which you do in hotel business because there are no guests on Sundays in business hotels. I started to talk about Ricardo Sambler, and the manager there, she was so inspired by that. So she read the book and she said, we should do this. And that was the start of it. So she and me, we just experimented with giving the authority to the group. They were, what was happening first was that they didn't really believe it, because they were so used to that Annika was really full of ideas, very competent, a driving force, really, a competent woman. So they were so unused to sort of not just doing her ideas. So they were sort of waiting, and can this be true that we can be in charge here? So it was a time of hesitancy before they stepped in and took on the authority.
Right. The image that comes to mind is, I don't know if you've ever seen those videos online where they let cows out of warehouses for the first time, and they throw open the doors of the warehouse like these cows have been kept in, and the cow's like, doesn't know if we should really leave, and like, what's the, yeah. I mean, okay. And so what were the sort of the things that, I guess you're talking about people who had roles as maybe chambermaids, or they were behind the bar, or
exactly,
maybe they were administrators. Like what were some of the things that changed for them?
So the first thing that they did was to sort of invent titles, and they invented titles like creativity managers. So everyone was managers, and they have those titles to sort of to state that they were in charge. There was some challenges also, because there was some characters there that were really responsible, like big sisters, and they stepped in, and people got annoyed by that, because we shouldn't have managers, and now you're managers. So there were processes, and the main challenge was also to be really straight and honest with each other. It was a good atmosphere, but that could be even more straightforward and honest communication. So that's why what was the biggest challenge. And I didn't expect so much financial results out of this. We did it out of curiosity and experimental spirit, and there was no big problems. But after 6 months, the profit increased. I think something like 20% or something. And I could see that was the source of this mental ownership that emerged. Yeah.
And that's interesting, because I was just telling you before we came on that my last guest was Jos de Blok, and of the Buurtzorg nursing organization in Holland, which again famously has employed self-organizing principles. And exactly the same thing. Very quickly was finding that they were doing the same work as other traditional nursing organizations at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
And for them, the revenue went up. So a big increase in profit almost immediately. Yeah.
Yes. And so there are like two sources of money and efficiency. That's engagement and responsibility, accountability. And I can't find any other way to release that than giving away the authority. And what was clear for me in that first case was the difference between giving away all authority 100% or doing it like 50% or halfway, because you don't get that effect if you don't do 100% give away the authority, because then it's just pretending.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that before in organizations where maybe you try and increase an approval limit a bit and maybe you get something, but you just don't get.
No, and that's the
you don't
source
get the time that this extraordinary transformations that you're discussing.
Exactly, and the extraordinary results.
Yeah. Fascinating. So you went the whole hog, and that's something interesting you said there, because that's not people don't tend to talk in terms of accountability and engagement when they're talking about profit. You know, they'll talk about product market fit and they'll talk about competitive advantage. It's about,
they talk about goals also, targets and goals and all sorts of things, but never about the real source.
Right. So it's engagement and accountability. So maybe let's just dwell on those themes for a little bit. So what were the ways in which you managed to increase engagement? Well, I suppose we've talked about accountability, but
yeah, so the only way I know about to create engagement is to give away the authority. And that's not new, you know. If you see a traditional team building exercises, people go away in the woods and they should, you know, build a house or like something together. And they have this task together. And the whole notion of that, the whole point of that is to collaborate and to engage and take responsibility for the task together. So that's not new. But you don't have to go into the woods. It's just to give away the company, you know, which they're in. That's the thing.
God, that's a stunning insight. I'd never considered that before. Yeah, we take people away on these retreats. We give them these fun tasks that they get completely engaged in a creative process. They got full accountability.
Yeah.
And they get back to the office on Monday.
Exactly.
Totally different.
It's just pretense.
That's funny.
And superficial things, instead of giving them the task at home.
Yeah.
At work.
And even on a it's interesting because my work as a coach and a consultant is some of that happens in a different way. We don't necessarily take people out to the woods, but even if you do a sort of workshop style meeting where you're getting people up, you're giving them engagement, you're giving everyone a voice, and they're putting Post-its on that their work is made. You create an environment where they're empowered and they have autonomy and they're given ownership of a creative process.
Yeah.
You come out with a load of results in terms of actions we must do, but you're slamming straight back into hierarchy.
Exactly.
And people almost get frustrated with having gone through the workshop because they're like, it's almost like they felt they've been led a merry dance up the hill and now it's back to reality.
Exactly. And that's the magic of it, because that's exactly what you do, but you do it every day. And then there is a honeymoon when there's like, wow, we can, we are in charge. And then it comes the time after the honeymoon when it's like, oh my God, I hate these people, because collaboration is so hard. And that's the second the other finding I realized very early was that the working climate or the atmosphere, the communication level has to be much higher level than in ordinary workplaces, because it's required to be in charge together and collaborate on those, for when you're collaborating in a real way, then you have to be so much more honest. You have to sort of be with each other differences and sort out conflicts and all that stuff. So after this first case, I immediately looked at how is the working climate, as I call it, in this, how is the communication? And that was key to sort of increase that or shift climates. And I learned how to shift climates, which we do today in tough leadership training. We go to any group that have toxic or really not nice working climate and we can shift that, because tried to do that because I thought it was so important.
Yeah. And is it through the same mechanism each time? Is it always about that shifting climate? It's about giving full autonomy, like full authority, giving it all away. Is that like the premise of it every time?
Yeah. So I would say there are three things. It's the all of the authority. If you want the effects, of course you can do it halfway, but don't expect the effects then. It's the working climate that needs to be in shape with openness, acceptance, straightforward communication, honesty, humanity, really. We are humans, and we pretend we're not sometimes in workplaces where we're so professional and so, not ourselves. And the third thing is, if managers is in the picture, and this I learned so many hard lessons, they need to shift completely in their way of leading. And if I can decide, which I could when I started to buy companies together with my colleagues, I would recommend to take away managers, because they have such a hard time to change, because managers are trained in being knowledgeable and driving, and that's their skills, and that's great skills. But it's so much in the way to empower a team.
Right. And why is it in the way? Like, yeah, just.
They in that role, in that traditional role of being knowledgeable and know a lot of things and being a driving force or being driven, that's a lot of sending, talking. So that's what managers do, and it's nothing wrong with them. They've been trained like that, and it's expected from them. So, and they have such a hard time to stop doing that and start to listening. So they're really not good at listening, and that's because they never trained that. And
yes.
And it takes so much to shift. So sometimes it takes too long, or it's even impossible. So it's better to give them other roles as experts or something,
right,
or engines, sort of. Or.
And Karin, is there anything in your own experience that you had to kind of let go of in your own style as part of this? I mean, do you
God, yeah. I mean, I wasn't born a listener not at all. I was an entrepreneur. I was like driving my way or the highway. I didn't listen to people. I finished their sentences, in fact. So I had some hardcore coaching in, learning how to listen. So and also to step back. And what was working for me, my blessing, is that I'm lazy. So laziness is a very good thing to have, because that's why who can do this, who can do this, and not having to do everything yourself.
Right. It's I think Bill Gates, I heard him once say, lazy staff are the best staff because they'll always work out the simplest way to get something done.
Yes. And I remember one other manager who was very good at this. His blessing was he thought he was competent. So I can't do it. Who can do it? So that's another blessing. Have an experience of being incompetent yourself.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah, learning how to listen. I mean, you major on that in the book, right? That's such a important skill.
It is, and it starts with confronting how little you listen.
Yeah. And it was through, you said, hardcore coaching. So how did that work? Like, how did that coach work with you? I'm just interested a little bit in the process there.
Yeah, but I think it's hard to change without feedback on how you occur, because we are blind to ourselves.
Yeah.
So for my part, the first time was at the marketing school, actually. The marketing school arranged some group exercises with a psychologist. And it went for a weekend, actually, and it was a lot of teamwork. And of course, being me and 28, I think I was, or something like that, I talked all the time. I was like so driving and so engaged and so on. And in the last session there, I got this secret note with an instruction. In this last exercise now, you should be low key. You should not say anything and be really passive. And I was followed the instructions. And the team was so confused because I was totally changed, And I got so heavy insights by me, dominating and getting how I was. And also what that was in the way for collaboration and letting others be involved, dominating, sort of. So that kind of feedback and coaching, you have to sort of expose yourself to change.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in Moose Heads on the Table, that the examples of leaders who've not really made the cut when it comes to implementing these principles. One feature of those people who fail is that they're not coachable, right? They're not willing to be coached into change. Yeah.
No, they might think they are, but in the end, they can't let go of the control, and trust, and also they might be in love with the traditional role, which is a lot about me and the hero manager, and it's a lot of gain in that.
Yeah. Reminds me, I don't know if you're aware of Medium, the blogging platform, right? And they took up holacracy, and they eventually gave up with holacracy. And one of the reasons they cited was because for certain people, they found that they couldn't attract I'm sort of paraphrasing, but they couldn't attract the talent because people wanted that traditional boss role or director role. And they just couldn't hire certain people because they couldn't give them that role. So they had to let go of holacracy to some extent, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, we are still in the traditional paradigm a lot, and people are looking for positions and power and all that. And I think also when we recruit managers, we talk about the soft skills and listening and involving, but we don't hire them on that in the end.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We'll have them on as values on the wall, but we don't necessarily hire on that basis. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and another example, I don't know if you've come across Matt Black Systems in Brighton in the UK. They've taken self-managing principles, and one of their great salespeople they had to let go when they moved to this way of working because he was used to being the sales director, and when it became completely flat and people and everybody had some aspect of selling in their role. He no longer had the team. There wasn't anybody, and even though he was great, he had to go. He left of his own accord.
Yeah. Another thing I've noticed is how important it is that the people involved in self-managing organizations are doing what they want to do, sort of, that they are doing their thing and they love their work, sort of, or the work task. We had a call center, we bought a call center and transformed it to be self-managed. And it was so obvious that it was important that people really liked the actual work. And that was not the case, especially here in Sweden, where safety and security is much more valued than having, doing an interesting work. So people end up in the wrong place work-wise a lot. And that works in hierarchies, but not so much in self-managing teams.
Yeah, I remember that as a powerful sort of story in the book. Like you can, if people are not really into their role, then maybe in some ways it's preferable to have more of a hierarchical organization where you're putting external motivators out in front of them, carrots and sticks, and you sort of, that's the way to get people in action.
Yeah.
And if the people are not intrinsically motivated to be in that environment and to work in that way, then you take that away. And
exactly. And it's also revealing that people sometimes don't know how to do their work. And the people have thought that they were competent for ages now, because working like this in self-managing ways, that is sort of very, you find out everything about what's not working with people and with routines and with everything. So it's very sort of, revealing.
That's fascinating. So the same guy, Julian Wilson from MapMatic Systems, is saying, that once they start moving in this way, that all of the people who'd been not pulling their weight for years suddenly become exposed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's, I guess that can be tough for people, but in
the long end, in the end, it's a blessing to sort of not having to pretend, not having to do what you're not sort of aimed for.
Right. Yeah. There's a place in the world that's going to be better suited, right?
Yes, I have many examples of that, actually.
Yes. So let's just come back a little bit to the training. So you said you talked about the people who don't quite make it, they can't quite let go. What are some of the things that we talked about listening, but what are some of the things you look to kind of amplify and bring out and bring on in leaders who want to take on leading in this way or managing in this way?
Yeah, it's a lot about listening, of course, but it's also not adding so much. I mean, we talk knowledgeable managers here with expertise, and to have this team capacity being unleashed, which is the whole thing, is to not bringing anything. You need to facilitate instead of adding and sending and putting in all the time. So and that's really hard because you feel useless when you're not adding so much. You feel unnecessary.
Right.
And that's really confronting. Yeah.
And that's what you're dealing a lot with when you're working with leaders is them facing that and processing it and finding ways to deal with it.
Exactly. And some of them are amazed by the engagement and the capacity and competence that arise when they step back. Yeah. But it's also painful because, and I have experienced that myself. I was CEO in one company for a year, for 8 months, and they became self-managed, and the results were amazing there in financial results, and people came running and made articles and radio programs about it. And those people in the company, they sort of forgot that I was there because that's part of it, When they think they did it themselves, they forgot that I was involved at all because it's so unnecessary in the end, which is so painful, when you hear that radio show, your ego is like, oh no. So it takes a lot from managers to stand that, to cope with that.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to recall that Lao Tzu quote. What is it? The bad leader is hated, the good leader is revealed, and the great leader is he of whom the people say, exactly. We did it ourselves, right?
Yeah. And that sounds so good in theory, but it's very painful.
Right. The other angle of this, I wonder, just from my own experience, I don't know if this resonates for you, but the premise of this way of working and managing is that every human being is unique and brilliant and alive with potential that just is, just waiting to be unleashed, right? You've got to kind of relate to every individual in that way. But, the way that our brain chemistry work and the mirror and I, in order for me to have a listening or a perception of you, Karin, on this call, right, as being this brilliant, illuminating presence and a wonderful leader, at some level, I've got to believe that's true of me. And in my own work, a lot of this sort of process is about me owning that for myself, such that I can, be it and sort of see it in others, right?
Exactly. I think you're talking about this really strong principle that is like relating to people's potential, sort of. And when you hear that, you think you should believe in that anyone can do anything, Everybody can be the rock star or like a brain surgery. whatever, surgeon. But that's not the meaning of it. Relating to potential is also to speak honestly about non-capacity or non-competence, and confront people with, I don't think you're fit for this job, I can't see how you're gonna have this work, but not as a judgmental way of talking to them, but straightforward. And so it's not like, oh, I believe in this person's capacity, but I see it's useless, but I believe, it's not that.
Not like a false hope.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Or pump people up with energy or something. No. It's really sort of saying straight what's there, and then people can grow from there, and they can realize I'm in the wrong place. I do the wrong stuff. I should do something else, or maybe I take it on, but it's my problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess your inner adult, if you can create that adult connection, or they might challenge back and say, well, I think you're misperceiving, but you're into a straightforward, honest dialogue, right? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also started this work with from another source with coaching unemployed people in the 90s when we had a big recession in Sweden. So I really trained on people that seemed totally incapable and resigned and cynical about getting a job. And I was thinking that it was really important to hold them accountable for them, and which was very strange thought in Sweden back then, because the state is responsible for works in Sweden, You're not at all, give me a job, was the common thought about it then. So it was very provocative to hold people responsible for getting a job and being adult and capable. But those years I could see the power of relating to even, really resigned and cynical and depressed people this way, and see them take out their capacity.
Yeah, well, I can see that's giving them their sovereignty, their power, their agency. You're kind of giving it to them, right?
And when I saw that happen with them, then I also got so confident in this way of relating to people at workplaces.
Yeah, right. And presumably you found people who, presumably some of them at least would, go on and be successful and find jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I can also see people shift attitude in a very short time, and to go from helpless and victims and go to really active and driving people.
Yeah. And then again, and that isn't about trying to pump them up and tell them that they're amazing beings. It's about listening and giving them accountability. I mean, just talk a little bit about that process. It might be interesting.
Yeah, we have this seminar called "Stop Motivating Your Employees." So to create engagement is really not to add, inspiration, add motivation, and all managers are stuck in that question. How could I motivate? How could I? And it's like it's glued in their brains, that question. And that's totally the wrong question. It's like, if there are a lack of motivation in a team, the thing is to relate to people's capacity to take responsibility for being motivated by saying to them, it seems like we have a huge lack of motivation here, without judging or making them wrong, but just stating. My experience is that there's a lot of or is a lack of motivation. What do you say to that? Or what is your feeling about that? And talk about it, and and unfold what's there, like lack of motivation, and then hold people accountable for creating the motivation they need to function.
Yeah.
Which is completely different.
Yeah. And then maybe you get into asking, like, where might you find motivation, or what gives you motivation, putting it back on them.
And these weeks with the corona on its 11th month or something, we get so many calls from our customers that, oh, we need to cheer up everybody, can you come and inspire? And we say no. No, we can't, but we can come and talk to them so they can express how they are and sort of take it from there.
Right, that makes sense. Reminds me, once I got fired from a training gig once because I said that to the woman who was running it. We had a very low energy group, and I said to her, I'm not responsible for the energy of this group. It's not my responsibility. It is what it is. I literally was told to not come back the next day.
Yes,
because she very much saw it as that's my job, right? You're the guy at the front. It's all it's your job to motivate these guys.
Yeah, get out the drugs. Sort of. We want happy.
Yeah. That was a real case of sort of worldviews clashing.
Yeah, and that's also shows how ingrained that is. Like, so when we sometimes work with groups, what they expect is like painkillers or like quick fixes and something that is easy and you just take it and be happy, and we come with bad news. We have to talk about how miserable everything is and take it from there, and the fear then is, but doesn't it get worse? We sort of drain, they don't at all approve of that solution because it's totally, different from this fixing and, pepping and cheering up and motivate.
It's fascinating because we ran a round table recently, and one of the questions we asked the group is, how are the ways you feel have felt vulnerable over this last period, right? And some people were sort of pretty balanced about it all, but some people got into some sort of negative sentiment, and you could just feel it. There were certain individuals in the group who just could not cope with the negativity, and they just wanted to bring the energy up, bring the positivity up. And it's so, as you say, it's so ingrained for some people to feel that need.
Exactly. And if you go to theories like the fire theory from Bill Schutz, for instance, and several others, everyone states that you have to go through the motions. You have to go through this, horrible feelings to come to the other side, which is an atmosphere of openness, being human, being accepting, being vulnerable, as you say. There's no shortcut to that. But very few end up in that beautiful landscape, which is much more fulfilling and satisfying, although it's challenging also sometimes because you have to be, yourself and a lot of challenging stuff. But so you put on this lid, let's be happy, let's do something fun. We can't be with this horrible feeling that it takes to get into the other domain sort of openness.
Right. And I've seen that over and over as people struggle to make that shift to the coaching. It's such a big element, isn't it? Because if you start moving into that facilitator role, you just open things up. Inevitably you're going to have some members of the group who are just going to launch at you with a load of shit, and if you're in a position of authority and they perceive like the structure somehow as being implicated in their woes, likely they're going to direct it at you at some level. And so you be able to sort of hold that. And I hear that a lot, of that fear in managers. Often it's, but if we open that up, Richard, I'm just don't think I'm ready to hear all the shit. And I'm like, well, that's part of the process.
So when we do processes like that, when it's a toxic climate or something going on, we sort of equip and train the managers to be okay with that, and also to coach them not to explain, take care, or save everyone, or so, to sort of cope with that process.
Right. Yeah. And it's only, but it's a transitional stage, right? Yeah. I mean, always you're going to have like different people coming into spaces with different feelings, of course. But I do think when you're opening up in a culture, there is some toxins that have to be released to begin with, right? As you say, to get to a different space.
Yes. And the great thing is that it doesn't take long if you can be with it and let it be as it is, then people will, the people involved will take themselves from that stage to this constructive one. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't take ages, but so few people have experienced that, so they don't trust that could happen.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's right. And then that's, as you said, that's part of the environment you talked about. The way you said it was partly, it's about giving authority away, but it's also creating this open environment. And what we've just discussed there is part of that, creating that environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to leadership, is there anything else we've not touched on in terms of what you see as being common for what leaders need to go through in their transition?
Yeah, leaders also need to be pioneers in being straightforward and give feedback, empowering feedback, and so on. And that's also not so common that they have been trained to do that. And it's not just being straightforward and they have to be relating to capacity, and they have to sort of change their mindset from the hierarchical mindset, which we're all swimming in. We are like, parent, child at work, although how well educated and senior we are as employees, we end up in that hierarchy, in that hierarchical dynamics. And especially here in Sweden, where we think we don't have that because we think we're unhierarchical, which we're not. We're blind to that. And it takes so much of confrontation of seeing that and being able to be equal. Because today in work life, people are, equal in education and competence. And some are managers, but in 150 years ago, that was not the case. People could not read and write. So that was accurate then, to have this hierarchical dynamic that where somebody thought and the others did or worked, just did what they were told, sort of. And so that is the biggest thing, I think, to see the hierarchical dynamics and to be able to break it.
Right. Yeah, actively. I guess that's the first step. Is see it and then break it and notice. Is it partly noticing yourself when you're falling into those?
Yeah, and there's so much denial of that because we're so modern and we're so team-based and we're so agile and we're so this and this, and on the same time is this hierarchical dynamic going on everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I say this as somebody who's guilty to some extent from the sort of agile camp. Is like, how often do you have this sort of agile pushing, this is the way, it's exactly the same dynamic, just, we say it's agile or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one more thing, when we train managers, for instance, in this way of being and relating, they think this is not leadership because it's so different from what they're used to. And they're so different from what they think is leadership. And that's because we have this, hero, manager, and concept engraved.
Yeah, I remember getting quite triggered by that feedback from somebody once. I was working with a client, and I'd done a lot of work to bring teams together to into these open space style events where we would collectively solve different problems, and people would self-select into different huddles to work on various aspects. And I remember getting some feedback from one of the guys I was working with, Richard, what you're really good at these communications events. And I was like, this isn't about comms. Not that comms isn't important, or that communication is important. But I'm creating, enabling spaces for people to step into their own agency and leadership. And you're telling me I'm good at comms, right? Yeah. And I had to kind of get over myself. But what I'm picking up on is that people don't relate to this as leadership, as you say. It's something. It's the soft stuff that the HR people do, or something, isn't it?
Exactly, and it feels so awkward to listen and just ask question and have focus on the group and not yourself and what you're saying. I mean, this sending stuff that I've been talking. People have so much faith in their words that they should make a difference. And if I just inform them on 27 PowerPoints, then it will happen,
Yeah, no, it's great. Reminds me again, we've talked about Jos de Blok before, but another story shared on the podcast was, in his early days of setting up Bertzorg, he was talking to some nurses, and he had this idea that they should have a balanced scorecard for each team. And, he's doing his flip chart and he's talking to the nurses about this balanced scorecard that he thinks that they should all adopt. And one of the nurses is like, why do we need this? Like, Jos, what's this? And he kind of caught himself like doing that thing of projecting, like, here's the thing you should take on.
Yeah, exactly. And never, listen, where do my word, where do they land? How do people, relate to them or react to them? That's like.
Yeah, but I also find that sometimes I've had the experience where even when I've tried to hold back, when I've been in leadership position and hold back on directing, people have said, no, Richard, give us some direction. Like, we're not paying you we want to be told. And I've sometimes found that I've had to sort of play some kind of game where I give like enough direction to get something going, and then always be trying to pull away, always be trying to pull back.
But you're touching something interesting there, because it's not just if you just step back, it could be also abdicating,
Yeah.
And if people are not there and involved and know they have authority or the prerequisites are there, that won't work, to step back. So it's not that either. And many people think that I just go away and wish them good luck, and it's not at all. So it's hearing the sort of what's going on here, it's so much more active, but in a passive way, sort of.
Right. Yeah. It's a kind of like a dance almost, isn't it? Like, feeling into what's needed. I mean, again, Bertzorg was talking about like it's needing culture, like what's needed.
Yeah.
Like, what's needed in the group? What are the emergent needs of this group? And then abdicating is not listening to those needs and not responding to them, right?
Not at all.
Yeah. So, but the leadership might be just part of is articulate. So what I'm sensing here, there's an emerging need for X. Like how might we fulfill X? Like how might you fulfill it? Like something like that. Less about,
Exactly. And as you say, there could be a big demand for, traditional leadership and directions. And so it's really hard to resist that.
Yeah.
That's what's asked for. And then you have to sort of also engage people in what kind of fashion you should work in, sort of, and bring up. It seems like you have an expectation of me being, the big boss and give you all instructions, and that's not going to happen, because that's not what I want. And I see something else, but then you have to talk about it and see what's in it for them to do it in another. Yeah. So it's a lot of conversations to have it work, if that's the case, if it's a big demand of traditional leadership.
Yeah, no, but I'm also seeing that, getting even from this conversation, that it sounds to me like even I, in my own leadership, could be a little bit more bold sometimes because I sometimes see it as, okay, well, I'll compromise a bit, like to get things moving and then over time, like work this environment to a better place. But maybe I could even be more bold, as you're suggesting, in some of these situations, and be like, I'm just gonna
Exactly.
yeah, I'm gonna say no to that, right? But I'm
Yeah.
gonna say no in a way that engages you and has you do it, like work a bit more at the edge.
Exactly. And that's the difference between being and saying, if you are an empowering and relating to potential and don't have an agenda, and you have your sort of being together or in place, then you can be that's a really shitty, alternative. I don't at all approve. That you can say and be really outspoken. But if you're like in a hierarchical dynamic and use your power, then it won't work.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's so
Because
much
people will
about
sense
being.
whether you're trying to the place you're coming at from, right?
Exactly. The way you're being really determines how it gets received.
Yes.
And if it's empowering or not.
Yeah. What's that quote? The quality of any intervention is direct proportion to the internal condition of the intervener, right? Is it Bill Chapman or whatever? Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And constantly coming back to who am I being? Yeah. How am I relating? And how am I relating to this person? Right? Like, yeah.
Exactly.
It's all that. Yeah. Wow, wonderful. We're coming up to the hour here. Is there anything, we've missed? Anything you want to sort of share that we may have not touched on?
I think we said the crucial things, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, again, if people are more interested, want to take another look, this is a very easy read. It's full of stories, moose heads on the table, as well as, you sum up some of the concepts very elegantly. And I know that you and Lisa wrote this, together. It sounds like a great partnership with the stories and then the more of the abstractions, perhaps from Lisa. So it's a great book, easy read, inspiring, and you're really open about the failures, which I love. So there's the book, and then there's the tough leadership training for
tough leadership
managers
training
out there who want to.
You can check that out, and we have also webinars called Stop Motivating Your Employees that are really sort of
love it. Good. All right. Well, thanks, Karin, once again. It's been wonderful to speak. We'll put all those links below. And thank you.
Thank you very much.